Good evening. Thanks very much for joining us on Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines we're tracking this evening. 94% of fund managers on Dalal Street expect another RBI rate hike in December and see the repo rate peaking only by March next year. Majority also expect the rupee to stay between 82 to 83 against the US dollar over the next 6 months. That's a CNBC-TV18 exclusive poll. Nearly 15% of the companies on the BSE 500 have a foreign currency loan exposure of 3.5 lakh crore rupees. As the Indian rupee weakens against the dollar, a CNBC-TV18 analysis finds chemicals, refineries and healthcare are the most vulnerable sectors with high Forex loan exposure. The Election Commission proposes to mandate more disclosures from political parties to explain possible ways to finance the promises made to voters. Says the current declarations are routine, ambiguous and inadequate. Seek a response from parties in a couple of weeks. The move comes amidst the Supreme Court hearing a case about so-called freebies. Ukraine's President Zelensky signs a decree ruling out negotiations with Russia's Vladimir Putin as Ukrainian troops reclaim more territory. Zelensky also hits back at billionaire Elon Musk for setting up a Twitter poll on areas annexed by Russia. North Korea sends a missile over Japan, prompting warnings for residents to take shelter. This is the first time since 2017 that North Korea has fired a missile over Japanese territory. Dozens injured and many feared dead after an avalanche in Uttarakhand. A group of mountaineers were trapped and the army was called in to help with the rescue operations. Well, let's start with the market action, where positive global cues helped the bulls regain some lost ground today. So we saw the Sensex gain nearly 1,300 points and the Nifty added 400 points. The Nifty now back above the 17,300 mark. Mid-caps faring even better with the index rallying more than 3%. Financials were not far behind either. Rima joins us now to wrap up the market action. Rima, a rebound for our markets today.
Market surge led by big global risk-on rally. The Sensex gaining more than 1,200 points. The Nifty well above 17,250. All the Nifty key indices closed in the green. The mid-cap index also soared with the advanced decline ratio looking solid with nearly 5 stocks in the green for 1 in the red. The leadership came in from the banking stocks, and here we got some very strong business updates from banks as well as NBFCs. So those numbers looked encouraging and that fueled the rally in the banking sector. The Nifty Bank was up more than about 1,000 odd points. But IT and metals as well contributed on the way up. So talking about individual stocks, IndusInd Bank and M&M Financials, business updates look very strong. Those stocks were higher in trade. In the metals pack, you had Hindalco, JSW Steel, Tata Steel rallying as there was this big rally that we saw in global markets, not just in US markets overnight, but there was follow through in Asia as well as Europe. And IT stocks ahead of the earnings season saw strength led by Wipro, TCS as well as Infosys. Tomorrow, Indian markets are shut. Today, there was no trade taking place in China as well as Hong Kong. So there was a bit of a truncated week taking place across Asia, but this turned out to be a solid session for our markets.
Yes, Rima, many thanks. We will be closed for the Shara tomorrow, but of course, global markets will be tracked here on CNBC TV18. In the money market, the rupee gaining more than 30 paise against the dollar today. The Indian currency remains above the 81 mark against the dollar. The greenback did weaken against most currencies after a strong run-up in the last few weeks. Crude oil prices are rising once again. Both Brent and NYMEX are up as OPEC nations could consider another cut to production. On Wednesday, OPEC will mull cutting output by 1 million barrels a day, and this is driving oil prices higher across the world. Back home, India's trade deficit for the month of September has marginally eased to around $27 billion from nearly $28 billion in the previous month. However, the September trade deficit is almost 19% higher year-on-year. Exports have contracted by 3.5% year-on-year to $33 billion. However, imports have grown by more than 5% year-on-year to $59 billion. And after the government hiked the import duty on platinum from 10.7% to 15.4%, sources say the move is aimed at curbing illegal imports of gold in the garb of platinum. We learned the Customs Department found several cases where platinum alloys, which is 4% platinum and rest gold, were being cleared at the reduced import duty of 11%. So what do our markets make of the current state of the economy? CNBC TV18 has polled top fund managers after the Reserve Bank rate hike on Friday. 94% expect another hike in rates come December. That is when the MPC is to meet again, and they expect the repo rate to peak by March next. Prashant is standing by with the exclusive details of the CNBC-TV18 Fund Manager poll. Prashant.
Well, the big question, which is very relevant here in India and globally as well, is where will central bank policy rates, RBI in our case, and globally, where will they settle at? How high is high enough? We conducted a poll of debt fund managers and experts, which threw up some interesting insights. Well, first, the question that we asked them was, where do they see repo rate settling by December? Almost 94% of them expect the Reserve Bank of India to hike the repo rate in its next policy meeting in December. Also, over 80% now expect a hike of between 35 to 50 basis points. Most of them also see repo rate peaking at between 6.25 to 6.5%. 50% of the respondents see the repo rate peaking by March of 2023. Next, about 69% see the RBI changing its stance to neutral in February next year. Interestingly, most experts don't see the 10-year government securities yield rising beyond 7.5%, which should come as a relief to equity fund managers as well. The yield which is polled is not much higher than where we are right now. Even on the currency, the rupee, the dollar rupee, despite the recent scare, a majority don't see it going past 83 to a dollar, not much by way of depreciation from here. Despite the relative stability that we've seen here in India amidst the global turmoil, market participants do tell us, though, that they will continue to closely watch geopolitics, global sticky inflation, and, God forbid, a financial accident, which, if it were to come to pass, could throw things into disarray.
All right, Prashant, many thanks for joining us. That is the CNBC TV18 poll on where the market expects rates and the rupee to be over the next few months. On to another exclusive analysis. Nearly 15% of BSE 500 companies have a foreign currency loan exposure of 3.5 lakh crore rupees. As the rupee weakens against the dollar, chemicals, refineries and healthcare are the most vulnerable sectors with the high Forex loan exposure. Sonal joins us now with the findings. Sonal.
The weakness in rupee is all one can talk about, and it has broken previous records last week. So my colleague Yusuf and I thought, let's look at some data to focus on which companies have a higher Forex exposure. So 71 companies from BSE 500, and this excludes banks and financials. They have a foreign currency exposure of 3.5 lakh crore rupees and aggregate borrowings of 15.2 lakh crore rupees, out of which 23% is foreign currency loan. This is as per data from Ace Equity. And sectors which have the highest foreign loan exposure are chemicals, refineries and healthcare segment. Breaking it down to individual companies now, the one with the highest percentage exposure to foreign debt. Alkyl Amines, small loan amount, but all of it is in foreign currency. Glenmark Pharma with almost 90% debt in Forex, Shipping Corporation at 100%, Oil India at 85%, Adani Ports as well at 66%. Moving on, UPL at 61.5%, there's Polyplex at 58%, SGVN at 55%, and ONGC at 53%, just to name a few. So it will lead to high interest outgo in case of dollar-denominated loans and will lead to higher expenditure. Important to note, the breakup of the Forex loan in a specific currency is not available. But with some examples, also wanted to point out that a lot of these companies have substantial export revenues as well, thereby negating the impact of higher interest outflow, because dollar strengthening will aid earnings as well for them, right? Now, the revenues in export markets could be a lot more and not necessarily denominated in dollars. So that is something that we need to remember. Alkyl Amines has 23 crore of debt in foreign currency, but 270 crore worth of exports. UPL has 16,000 crore debt in foreign currency, but 36,000 crore in terms of revenues from exports, out of which 7% is from Europe, 37% exposure is to North America. Glenmark Pharma has 3,300 crore of debt that is in foreign currency, and 6,700 crore of revenues from exports. Sudarshan Chemicals, that exports to 80 plus countries, has almost 1,000 crore revenues from exports and 480 crore of debt in terms of Forex. Additionally, as per Bloomberg, nearly $11 billion worth of foreign currency notes are getting matured over the next 1 year, while bonds worth $500 million each are maturing in October for NTPC and BPCL. Next year would see bonds of similar values getting matured for Vedanta Resources, IOCL and ONGC Videsh, to name a few here. Now we are talking about loans, right? So let me also focus on revenues. The exposure will be higher for some names in the specialty chemical space because of higher exports to other countries. Many of these companies will see higher exposure because India's exports of chemicals hit a record high at $29 billion in FY22. That compares to $14 billion in FY14. We have names like Vinity Organics with 69%, Clean Science at 70%, Galaxy Surfactants with 62% revenues coming in from exports. For Fine Organic, Naveen Fluorine, Atul Limited, NoSil, Aarti Industries, Deepak Nitrite and Alkyl Amines, all of them have exposure anywhere between 70 to 70% in the list that I have mentioned. And out of this, for some companies, we know the exposure to Europe as well. And that is where we are seeing crisis due to energy prices, and this is something that could pressure on demand as well for these companies. So the numbers on the screen are a percentage of the total exports and not the total revenues that is the companies do to Europe. Anupam Rasayan has 46% of total exports to Europe, which is followed by Vinity Organics. Naveen Fluorine as well has almost 60% exports. PI Industries at 10%, Neogen at 27% of total exports to Europe. So many companies have sizable exposure to Europe as well, making them vulnerable to demand and added woes of currency depreciation there. Important to note that every company has its own hedging mechanism in place, so the net effect on earnings depends on that. But these are just some numbers that we wanted to focus on.
All right, Sonal, many thanks for joining us. The United Nations body has warned that a drive by central banks of richer nations to hike interest rates in response to soaring prices is an imprudent gamble that could dangerously backfire. The report, which has been prepared by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, suggests that a course correction is required to prevent a cascading series of debt, health and climate emergency for poorer countries. Now, after the mega 5G rollout last week, the government has allocated 26,000 crore rupees to set up 25,000 telecom towers in the country over the next 500 days. The government will utilize the Universal Service Obligation Fund for the deployment of these towers. It will use its special purpose vehicle, Bharat Broadband Network Limited, for the same. September has turned out to be a sluggish month for Indian FMCG companies, with sales declining by nearly 10% versus August, according to retail analytics firm Bizom. Cautious stocking up by consumers amidst inflation worries and a slowing rural income were reasons for sales showing a slower pace. Shilpa Ranipeta joins us now with more. Shilpa, what seems to have impacted September sales?
Well, a slowdown in rural areas has dragged down FMCG sales for the whole month of September. Now, according to data from Bizom, rural sales were down over 14% in September, and that was on the back of inflationary pressures, while urban areas saw 1% growth over the previous month. Now, overall sales too declined nearly 10% in September, and this is on account of both a rural slowdown and also a lull after heavy stocking was seen in August for Independence Day and for Ganesh Chaturthi. Now, from a category point of view, beverage and packaged food sales, those were down about 6% or more. Commodity sales were down nearly 15%. That is on the back of edible oil prices, edible oil companies cutting prices. But given how prices moved in the past year, they are still up nearly 18% on a year-on-year basis compared to September last year in value terms. Now, personal care sales also were flat. Confectionery sales were down about 5%. Bizom says that there is cautious stocking that is happening in rural areas amidst inflationary worries. Also, erratic monsoons have impacted rural incomes. However, October should see a pickup in the run-up to Diwali. Parle too corroborated Bizom's data, saying that September was that lull period between festivals and hence the lower sales, though festive season per se doesn't see much of an uptick during the festive season for the FMCG industry. But Parle does expect specialty products like confectionery and gift packs to pick up closer to Diwali. Back to you.
All right, Shilpa, many thanks for joining us. Speaking of retail sales, according to the Federation of Automobile Dealers Association, total vehicle retail sales grew by a healthy 11% in September versus last year. Among categories, two-wheeler sales rose 9%, while three-wheeler sales recorded a whopping 72% jump. Meanwhile, passenger vehicle sales were up 10%, commercial vehicle sales up 19%. Auto dealers are optimistic of better sales in this festive season. Expect passenger vehicle sales to be at a decade high during this period. Kia India has recalled over 44,000 Karen units to inspect and fix any potential error in its airbag control module software. The automaker said that any update needed would be done free of cost. We will head into a break, but up next, the Election Commission proposes to mandate more disclosures from political parties to explain possible ways to finance promises made to voters. More on that when we return. The Election Commission has proposed to mandate more disclosures from political parties to explain possible ways to finance poll promises made to voters. The EC said that the current declarations are, and I quote, routine, ambiguous and inadequate, end of quote. The election regulators also proposed to amend the Model Code of Conduct to make directions operational. It has asked political parties to give their feedback on this issue by the 19th of the month. Timsy joins us now with more. Timsy, this move comes even as the Supreme Court is hearing a case about the issue of so-called freebies. What is the EC proposing?
In a major move, the Election Commission of India has written to all political parties seeking their responses to mandate declarations for election manifesto promises, the financial viability of those promises to be shared with voters. Election Commission of India has recommended that the political parties should provide authentic information to voters, and they should give clarity about financial implications and where will the finances be actually raised from to meet those promises. The move comes on the back of the fact that ECI said that it cannot overlook inadequate disclosures on election promises, and empty election promises have far-reaching ramifications. Not just this, the Election Commission has proposed to launch a standard performer for disclosures for the political parties to capture standard parameters which are as used by the Finance Commission, RBI, FRBM, CAG and in budgets. The Chief Secretaries and Finance Secretaries of States and Union Finance Secretary at Centre will be tasked to populate fiscal information based on the revised estimates and budget estimates in the year of general elections, and political parties will have to give details of revenue generation, rationalization of expenditure, impact on committed liabilities and whether the party plans to raise further debt to meet these promises and what will be the impact on the FRBM limits. Parties have been given time till 19th of October to come back with their suggestions before the guidelines are cast in stone. Let's see what is in offering.
Timsy, many thanks for joining us. Dozens have been injured and many feared dead after an avalanche in Uttarakhand. A group of mountaineers were trapped and the army was called in to help with the rescue operations. A domestic help has been accused in the alleged murder of Jammu and Kashmir's Director General of Prisons, Hemant Kumar Lohia. He has now been arrested. The 23-year-old was nabbed after a major manhunt and is currently being interrogated. Lohia was found dead at his residence on the outskirts of Jammu on Monday night. According to officials, the body bore burn injuries and his throat was slit. For the first time in history, Home Minister Amit Shah has announced scheduled tribe status for Pahadis in Jammu and Kashmir. Addressing a rally in the Rajouri district, the Home Minister said that abrogation of Article 370 and 35A is opening the doors for Pahadis to get reservation in education and jobs. The union government has withdrawn a notice that sparked outrage among journalists. A list of all press writers, photographers and videographers covering Prime Minister Modi's upcoming rally in Himachal Pradesh were asked to bring a certificate of their character verification. The Superintendent of Police at Bilaspur issued a new notification on Tuesday with apologies saying the previous notice stands withdrawn. Both factions of the Shiv Sena are scheduled to hold their respective Dussehra rallies in Mumbai tomorrow. The Uddhav Thackeray faction will hold their traditional Dussehra rally at Shivaji Park after the Bombay High Court ruled in the favour. Eknath Shinde-led Sena faction will hold its own rally at the BKC grounds in Bandra. Both factions had applied to the BMC for permission to hold Dussehra rallies at Shivaji Park. The civic body had rejected both applications. North Korea sent a missile over Japan, prompting warnings for residents to take shelter. This is the first time since 2017 that North Korea has fired a missile over Japanese territory. The latest in the Russia-Ukraine war, Ukrainian President Zelensky has signed a decree refusing any further negotiations with Russian President Putin. The development comes after Putin formally proclaimed that 4 occupied Ukrainian regions were set to become part of Russia. Russia, however, does not have full control of any of these regions that it claims to have annexed. The Russian military has acknowledged that the Ukrainian army has advanced inside the Kherson province. And our colleague Sanjay Suri takes us through a wall plastered with pictures of soldiers that have died fighting for Ukraine in this war. Here's his report from inside war-torn Kyiv.
This here is a long wall in Kyiv, too long to honor all the Ukrainian soldiers who've died fighting in this war. 3,500 pictures just on this wall, and it's not enough. More space is being created behind to create more room to remember and to honor yet more soldiers. A reminder that the victory in Kharkiv and then in Lyman, and that one in Donetsk region, coming the day after Putin had claimed that to be a part of the Russian Federation, is a reminder that those victories are coming at a very heavy human price. But this price has done nothing to diminish the faith and the belief that Ukrainians will continue to fight on to reclaim more territory that is theirs for themselves and for Ukraine. She's here for her husband who was killed in Kharkiv.
So every kilometer, every piece of every village, every settlement is a big victory for us, and of course we feel a big proud for that. And when I saw the photos of the soldiers, of the man who died, it seems like they felt like they had to go there. Something was calling them.
Yeah, I think that this is the very start of our counteroffense, a big counteroffense on different fronts, which will eventually end up with us liberating all of the territories that Russia even occupied in 2014, including all the Donbass and all the Crimea.
Amidst all the mourning comes anger with Putin.
No Putin, yes Zelensky.
No Putin.
We for peace, not war, and all of us for peace. We should be strong and glory for Ukraine.
Ukraine's successes in Kharkiv and now in Lyman have convinced many Ukrainians that however tragic the losses, they are now on the path of victory.
Well, that is Sanjay Suri reporting there from inside war-torn Kyiv. And with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. Stay tuned. The news continues here on CNBC-TV18.